Day 2 of RSS 2024. My name is Richard Smith. I'm chair of the Speaker Committee, and it's my pleasure to welcome you this morning. We've got a wonderful day ahead with all kinds of wonderful presentations. We have the Meta CTF Capture the Flag contest going on as well as the Lockpick Challenge. So check those out as well. That's a new. Both of those are new this year, so we're really excited about that. I've got a few announcements. The first thing is there are a couple of schedule changes, which, perfect timing. They're up there on the board. So just be aware of that. If you need parking validation, you can go to the registration desk, over that way with the big open hatch window, and they will take care of that. Also, if you need general validation to feel like there's some good in this world, they're willing to provide that too. Please do make sure after each session today, we'd really like you to fill out the surveys to let us know, how we did, how our speakers did, anything we can improve, all of that good stuff. In previous years, we had an app that you would download. This year, we just have a link to the surveys on our website, which you can access from any mobile device. It's rochestersecurity.org, and there's a button on that front page that will take you to the survey platform. Let's see. Lunch this year. I know in previous years it's been in here. This year, like we did last year, it's going to be upstairs in the Empire Hall. So there's escalators over that way that will take you up there. I think most of us made it there yesterday, so I think we're good. But just so you're aware, lunch is now upstairs in the great big hall up there. I've also been asked to announce that the ISACA branded hoodies and jackets that are at the ISACA table, which is next to the registration desk, those are available only with proof of ISACA membership. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm sure they'll be happy to explain. So just be aware of that. The beanies on the ISA table, however, those are available. Take one, take a multicolored, neon hoodie, and be the envy of all your friends. I think that's it for announcements. So that just leads me to introduce this morning's keynote, who has flown all the way from London, England, to be with us. He was the developer of the first version of Dr. Solomon's antivirus toolkit, for those of us who remember that. And since then, he's worked in several leading cybersecurity companies across the industry. He's known widely as an international speaker at conferences, and he now hosts two award-winning podcasts. Well, one award-winning and one which I'm sure will be winning an award at some point very soon. Of course, I'm speaking about Mr. Graham Cluley. Graham.
Thank you very much. Right, let me start up my laptop. Here we go, into here. PowerPoint, la la la. I do that. And we're off. Aha, it worked. Hello, everybody. My name's Graham. Thank you very much for that introduction, Richard. For the next 45 minutes or so, it's my real pleasure to speak to you about cybersecurity. And specifically today, I'm going to talk about stealing the crown jewels, what we should be doing about that, how we might even be able to steal the crown jewels. And I'm going to tell you the story of somebody who actually did steal the crown jewels. But first of all, start with a question, an important question, which is this: what's the most valuable data in your organization? Have you thought about what you cannot afford to lose inside your company or organization? The data you can't afford to fall into the hands of hackers or to be published online, the damage which might be done to your organization. For some organizations, it's fairly easy to know what that is that you don't want to lose. In the case of banks, obviously, it'd be really, really uncomfortable and slightly embarrassing if you were to lose all of your money. But we're not talking today about physical things which you might lose. What we're talking today is more about data and information. So if you were a bank like Capital One, for instance, it would be really, really bad to lose names, addresses, zip codes, email addresses, dates of birth of your clients, their income, their credit scores, their balances, their payment history. You don't want that being lost. And you don't want 140,000 of your customers' social security numbers being lost either, or 80,000 account numbers being taken. And that's what happened because a hacker managed to gain access to 14 years' worth of credit card applications, 100 million credit card applications. Now, Capital One knew nothing about this until someone contacted them. And as luck should have it for Capital One, it wasn't the bad guys who contacted them, it was a security researcher who responsibly disclosed to them that he had discovered evidence that their data had been taken by a hacker. This is the email that was sent to Capital One. Hello there. It appears that there's some leaked data from an S3 AWS bucket which someone has put up on GitHub belonging to you. And they gave the URL to the GitHub directory. Let me know if you want any help tracking down this person. Now, as it happens, the good news is the police were able to find the culprit. Capital One went to the authorities, and the authorities were pretty soon knocking on the door of somebody. On June 29th, 2019, at 6 o'clock in the morning, armed agents raided a house where they arrested someone called Paige Thompson. Let's take a look.
The FBI came here to her home to arrest Paige Thompson. They were ready to break down that door if they had to. They didn't have to. And when Thompson decided to look into Capital One's computers, she found the door wide open. Capital One is a $43 billion bank, but Paige Thompson was able to hack into their system and, according to FBI agents, steal 100 million personal records. Surveillance video captures the moment the FBI raid team takes Thompson into custody about 6 yesterday morning. Her housemates asked us not to show their faces.
More or less, from what we understand, is she did it just because she could. She said when she worked for Amazon years ago that she did some hacking then. That was it. Everything she knows, she learned by herself.
Online, FBI agents found she posted information from the intrusion on a page that includes Paige Thompson's full name.
Oh dear. I think there's a couple of things we need to talk about here. One is that if you're planning to post up information which you've stolen from an organization which you've hacked, maybe don't post it up on a GitHub page where your name is even in the URL, right? It's not that hard to find. I mean, what happened to the good old days? The good old days of when computer viruses were written by hackers who had fancy names like Dark Avenger, Apache Warrior, Slarty Bartfast, Colostomy Bag Boy, Garbage Heap, Capital One Sucks. These would all have been fantastic usernames. But Paige Thompson instead decided to, she even included her middle name, Paige Adele Thompson, in that GitHub URL. So that's one thing we have to talk about. The other thing, the real elephant in the room, however, the thing we cannot ignore about that TV report, what was that all about? The hacker said, sorry, not the hacker, the person who lived in the same home said, I don't want to be on camera. Turned out later, by the way, the reason why they didn't want to be on camera is that they'd had some dodgy dealings as well and some mischief, which it came up. That's another story entirely. But here we even had a close-up of their shoes at one point in that report. It's just like, what? What are you doing here? So, crazy things going on, of course. Now, if you went to that GitHub page, what you found was this. Here was Paige Thompson's page where they list all the projects which they do. Also, on the profile, you were able to determine the IP addresses associated with a VPN. VPN iPredator, which was the VPN which Paige Thompson had used when accessing Capital One's data. So, bit of a clue there. When they'd gone to the cloud storage. Also, we found out Paige Thompson is based in Seattle, Washington. She linked to a LinkedIn page. I went to the LinkedIn page. You can go up there right now, look at her job history. Oh, yes, used to work at Amazon and has now been pilfering from an Amazon web bucket. All kinds of information. You can also download online her CV, name, address, phone number. Now, at this point, you have to ask yourself, always contact information. You have to ask yourself, if you were the FBI, if you had all these clues, if you had this URL, if you had these links to her CV, if you had this job history, probably a suspect you wanted to go and speak to. I wonder if any others come to mind. And then, when they began to dig a little bit more deeply, what they found was that Paige Thompson, do you remember Capital One were informed by a security researcher who tipped them off? Turns out Paige Thompson had been messaging back and forth with this security researcher, saying that there was information which they believed they could get from Capital One, and they were interested if this researcher was interested in it as well. And so they were saying how they were going to do it. I'm going to use a VPN, iPredator, I'm going to go on tour, I'm going to go to their cloud bucket, I'm going to get all of this stuff. And what's more, they also said, I've basically strapped myself with a bomb vest, beeping, dropping Capital One's docs and admitting it. There's full social security numbers, names and dates of birth. Is it any wonder that the FBI, when they went round, actually came round armed, as captured on the Ring doorbell or whatever it is that they had outside the house? So that is why the hacker got caught. Elementary mistakes being made by this hacker. It turned out that Paige Thompson had created a tool that found misconfigured Amazon buckets. It's the most simple, this is not elite hacking skills here. This is elementary stuff which all organizations should be properly defending themselves from. Rather than making it so easy for the hacker, you just leave it all lying around for anyone to scoop up. They hacked more than 30 companies, including Capital One, and sometimes when they had access, what they did was they installed crypto mining software onto the computers as well. So there was a financial motive. Ultimately, sentence to time served, 7 years probation. If you look on LinkedIn, you'll see there's been a bit of a career break, perhaps understandably. Here is Capital One CEO, who's saying that he takes security very, very seriously, because after all, that's the meme, isn't it? His picture looks slightly as though it's been deep-faked. I don't know if that really is him, but anyway, it's just that sort of that glacial grin, that Richter stare of, I've just been hacked, and potentially millions and millions of my customers are going to be upset. $80 million Capital One ended up paying in fines for that security breach. And then that got woomphed up because there was a class action from the customers which took another $190 million from Capital One. So in total, what's that? $280 million. That's $2.80 for every customer who had their social security. When you talk about it like this, the numbers are really ridiculous, aren't they? You could argue that Capital One got away actually quite lightly for an elementary mistake. We don't want that to happen to any of the companies here. We wouldn't wish this upon any of us. No company can consider that it is immune to being targeted by hackers. I suspect all of your organizations have been targeted by hackers. It all rather depends on how well you've managed to repel the attack or how well you've managed to deal with the attack once it actually happens. Some organizations, unfortunately, get hacked more than once. Oh, we interrupt this presentation for a brief message from T-Mobile. T-Mobile, August 2018, hackers stole details of over 2 million of their customers. November 2019, hackers accessed details of over 1 million T-Mobile users, including their phone numbers, their billing addresses, their account numbers, details about the rates and plans which they were on. March 2020, hackers broke into employees, the staff at T-Mobile, their email accounts, stole customer account information. January 2021, hackers accessed customer details, including their phone numbers and account numbers again. It carries on, doesn't it? August 2021. August 2021, hackers accessed 100 million customers' names, driving license details, government ID, all kinds of information. Social security numbers again, dates of birth, T-Mobile, prepaid PINs, addresses, and phone numbers as well, and offered them for sale on the dark web. Also in 2021, T-Mobile announced a substantial multi-year investment working with leading cybersecurity experts, and this is the great big image which they put up outside their store in Times Square, saying, "Your safety is our priority." And they said, "We've made substantial progress today." Well, you would hope so, because by now, at least about 7 or 8 hacks, which I know of, oh, it's still carrying on. Here we are, January 2023. Hackers spent a month stealing information over 37 million users via an API flaw, which was offering up information about T-Mobile. And it was going on, as I said, for a month before T-Mobile noticed. Now, this isn't to victim shame. I accept it can happen to anyone. But maybe when they go around saying, "Your safety is our priority," maybe they need to put their money where their mouth is and actually properly invest in that. Get the security team properly resourced to harden the security and change the culture inside the organization, because it keeps on happening too often. The crown jewels are being stolen. So you don't want your crown jewels being stolen. You don't want to be the subject of one of my presentations coming up in the future. And so do you know what your company's crown jewels are? For some organizations, it will be intellectual property. The patents, the trade secrets, the customer databases. And ask yourself, what are the consequences if you lose those, if they fall into the hands of rival companies, if they're sold on the web? Could be a huge amount of money. And the damage which can be caused by having information leaked about your users, about your partners, the reputational damage, it could potentially lead to a fall in your business, a reduction in the money coming in, perhaps ultimately the closure of your entire organization. So you can't afford to lose your crown jewel. I keep talking about the crown jewels. I think what would be interesting is to actually look at the crown jewels. Because the crown jewels have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. And they're kept in this place. I went on Google Street View, and I got a picture of the Tower of London back home in Blighty. Okay, here's an aerial shot of the Tower of London as it is today. But via the power of PowerPoint, I can take you back in time from the present day. And by the way, this was the hardest bit of the entire presentation to create. So please appreciate it. The time I spent moving clouds. Yeah, that's right. This is real PowerPoint kung fu going on here. I'm so proud of that. I'm so proud of it, I have to point it out to people. So the Tower of London's been around for a long time. Here it is, photograph I took earlier this week. But if you look at it back in the old days, this is what it used to look like. If you went up in a helicopter in 1647, the Tower of London would have looked like this. And does it remind you of anything? I think maybe it should. I mean, this was built by William the Conqueror, fresh from his victory at the Battle of Hastings. It was a mighty stone fortress. Nothing like the Tower of London had ever been built before. And over the years, the Tower of London was expanded by subsequent kings. They added huge defensive walls, a series of moats, towers, and they enlarged it. And they transformed the tower into England's largest and strongest concentric castle, with one ring of defences inside another. You can see where I'm going here. This is what I'm talking about. A layered defence model. And right at the heart of it, that's where you put your mission-critical assets. That's where you put the thing which you can't afford to lose. That's where you put your crown jewels, right in the middle there. And in the case of the Tower of London, it wasn't just a place to store the nation's valuables. It was also an armory. So that's where they kept other things they didn't want to lose. So they had guns and things. right, and munitions. And so over the years, they'd put all these guns in there. And they thought, well, this is great, they thought. This is great. What else can we use this place for? Well, why don't we make it the treasury, where coins are minted? So we'll put loads of money in there. We'll make the money inside the Tower of London. Fantastic. All right. Well, what else do we need to keep really secure? Oh, let's make it a prison. Let's also, we've stored away all our precious stones, our jewels, our money, and guns. Let's shove a bunch of criminals in there as well. Bad guys, people who the king doesn't like. So we put all our criminals in there as well. You know, which seems a rather odd decision. Tell you what, let's shove all the criminals where all the money is and where all the guns are. Let's put them in there. Oh no, they said, we've thought of that because we're also going to use the Tower of London as a zoo. So they put lions in there. I'm not kidding you. They had lions in this place with prisoners and guns and money and jewels. And they thought, well, that's good. And right in the middle, they had the crown jewels. But don't worry, because it's secure. How on earth is anybody going to break in that? Well, there's a guy called Colonel Thomas Blood. And 1671, he really, really liked the idea of the crown jewels. He really wanted them. And he'd had plenty of misadventures already. He was a known criminal. And he was one of the most wanted men in England due to his past shenanigans. But he loved the idea of owning the crown jewels. And so he wanted to break in. But the problem was, of course, the crown jewels are safely stored inside the Tower of London. The Tower of London, which you'll remember, has got loads of lions. How's he going to do this? Now, the strange as it may seem, way back then, hundreds of years ago, they had this thing going. In 1669, the crown jewels were put on public display. You could buy a ticket. And if you bought one of these tickets, you could go to see the crown jewels. You can do this still to this day at the Tower of London. I haven't done it. It costs a fortune. We leave it for American tourists. People who actually live there have never been inside the Tower of London. It's just you lot who go there. But what they will do, I don't know if it still works the same now, but back then, in 1669, you could buy your ticket, and there was a man who would take you down into this dungeon, and he would take the crown jewels out of a cupboard and show them to you. So Thomas Blood fancied a bit of that. He thought, I'd quite like to see the crown jewels. Maybe I can pinch them. But he had a problem. As I mentioned earlier, he was wanted. One of the most wanted men in England. So what do you do when you're one of the most wanted men of England and you want to get into the high security Tower of London to steal the crown jewels? Well, of course, you adopt a disguise. And that's what he did. He was a master of disguise. Now you would never know it was him. And he had a final little gizmo which would convince everybody. He wore a cross. Oh, well, he must be trustworthy then. He presented himself as a parson. He was no longer Colonel Thomas Blood. He was now the Reverend Alof. And he bought a ticket. And he also hired himself an actress, because that's what you want. If you want to break in somewhere, you have to look as though you're completely harmless. And so he hired himself an actress who he claimed was his wife. And with his ticket, he went to the Tower of London, and he asked the 77-year-old keeper of the crown jewels, a guy called Talbot Edwards, the keeper of the crown jewels, if he could view them. And Sir Talbot Edwards took him down into the dungeon, unlocked the little cupboard, and said, "Here's the crown jewels. What do you think of that then?" And they looked at them and they thought, well, you know, tickets were quite expensive. It's not that impressive. You'll get a similar experience today, by the way, if you're an American tourist going to the Tower of London. You'll probably spend 25 quid or something and queue up for ages, and you'll think, really, was that so worth it? So they took him there. And remember, he'd brought an actress with him. So what did the actress do? She pretended to faint. There she goes. Mrs. Blood has fainted. Oh my goodness, what are they going to do? And so Talbot Edwards took Mrs. Blood to have a bit of a lie down in his apartment inside the Tower of London. And she was looked after by Talbot Edwards' wife. There, you can see the resemblance. You can see why they married each other. Leaving, of course, Colonel Blood alone with a locked cupboard, which he tried to break into. But he didn't have the right equipment with him. Sometimes hackers won't succeed on their first attempt. They may just be doing reconnaissance for a future attack. A few days passed, and Colonel Blood had a new idea. He thought, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to befriend the keeper of the crown jewels. So he wrote a letter, again, posing as a parson, which isn't easy to say at this time in the morning. Posing as a parson, he wrote a letter thanking Mrs. Edwards' wife, the one with the moustache, for showing so much kindness to his wife after she fainted. Lovely letter. And he sent 4 pairs of white gloves. So, here's my appreciation. And they got chatting, and they got talking, and there's a bit of back and forth with the letters and everything. Oh, thank you. No, thank you so much for saying thank you. Well, no, really, it's all me. I should be thanking you. The way us English people do. We spend half of our lives apologizing, saying thank you, or saying sorry. A few weeks later, they have become what is known as BFF. Best friends forever. Oh, wonderful. Yes, it's true. Social engineering existed hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And so we'd go round sometimes for tea. And they noticed that Mr. and Mrs. Edwards had a young daughter who was quite pretty. And the parson, our villain here, said, you know, I've got a very wealthy nephew. He's very handsome. And your daughter, she's extremely good looking as well. I wonder whether they should, get together and, bang some rocks together or whatever. It's whatever the kids say these days. I'm sure they do. I'm sorry, I don't know where that came from. But anyway, woo! Anyway, so he told them all about his incredibly dashing young nephew. And they made an arrangement that they would go on a date. His nephew, the daughter of the keeper of the Tower of London. And so it was, on 9th of May, 1671, the date was set. Now, unusually for a date, it was set for 7 o'clock in the morning, which I don't think is the most romantic time of day. I'm not at my best there. I'm not my most sparkling. Seems to be a terrible time to have a date. But sure enough, Colonel Blood, in his disguise, with his fake beard, with his fake wealthy nephew, and with a couple of hoodlums as well, they rode into the Tower of London on their horses. And while the nephew got to know the keeper's daughter, the rest of the gang said to Talbot Edwards, hey, while they're what did I say, banging rocks together, while they're, getting to know each other, maybe I've been telling my friends here about how lovely the crown jewels look. I wonder maybe whether you could show us. And of course, Talbot Edwards, being great friends now with the parson, takes them down into the dungeon and he unlocks the cupboard and says, here they are then, here's the crown jewels. And it's at this point that Blood knocked the keeper of the Tower of London unconscious with a mallet and stabbed him with a sword. Nasty. Look at that. True Pixar-level animation we're getting today. So, This poor chap now is lying on the ground. And these hoodlums have access to the crown jewels. They have a problem, though. How are they going to exfiltrate the crown jewels from inside the heart of the Tower of London? Because the crown jewels, they're not exactly, they're a little bit bulky. So you have this problem, for instance, that the orb, which is this great big round thing, and they thought, well, where can we hide this about our person? And so one of them shoved it down his what must have been extremely baggy trousers. So one of them did that, and meanwhile, the other one was trying to break the scepter in two. He was trying to saw through it, saw it in half, so that he could hide it under his clothing as well. Now, I've actually managed to secure CCTV footage of the actual theft. This is very rare. Using a rubber band and a time machine and a Ring video doorbell, I've managed to put this together. Here it is. Here is the CCTV footage. Unfortunately, it's only one frame every 500 years. But that is the actual crime in progress. And Blood tried to squeeze the crown, because he took the crown, because you would, wouldn't you? If you're doing a heist of the crown jewels, one of you is going to have to carry the crown. And so Thomas Blood decided, I'm going to take the crown, but I need to squeeze it into a bag. And so he started hitting it with a mallet, the mallet which had previously been used on the tower keeper of the crown jewels. And it is at this point that Edwards regained consciousness and began to shout out, "Murder!" which technically it wasn't, though no one was actually pedantic enough to point that out at the time. I think you'll find, I'm sure you've got people inside your organization, whenever there's just a ritual thumping on the head with a mallet and a stabbing, who you will point out to them, technically that isn't murder unless you are actually deceased. But no, he shouted out murder and treason. And so the bobbies were involved, and tower security were on the run. And Blood and his accomplices, they dropped the scepter, they attempted to get away, but Blood was arrested as he tried to leave the Tower of London by the Iron Gate. And after unsuccessfully trying to shoot one of the guards, at that point, guns were a little bit like installing CrowdStrike onto your server. Things can go wrong. Things backfired. Accidents happen. Right? Put the hands up. I actually admire CrowdStrike, actually, for the way in which they handled that. I know they've now become a music hall joke. But, the way in which they responded to that, I think, had a lot of nobility compared to the typical way in which companies respond to some kind of cybersecurity incident. And as a result, Colonel Thomas Blood was arrested and put behind bars. Oh, great. We've got some people who have some patriotism for the UK. I thought you guys would all be, what a shame. Should have shoved it to those Brits. Now, in custody, Thomas Blood refused to answer any questions. He just kept on saying, I will answer to no one but the king himself. Although he said it in an Irish accent. So, I will speak I'm not even going to try it. Is there anyone from Boston here? Actually, most Americans think they're Irish, don't they? They claim to be Irish. So you can probably do it better than me. But yes, he was presented in front of King Charles of England. Here's King Charles. King Charles was mightily amused by him. King Charles was laughing away at the hearing of this story because he said to him, look, he said, you've stolen my crown jewels. He said, they're worth £100,000. And Thomas Blood said, oh, you've got to be joking, begorra. They're only worth £6,000 at most. You're causing a great big fuss. King Charles thought this was hilarious and laughed, and he was so amused that what he did was he gave, this is all true, by the way, this whole story is true. Right? This is actually factually researched. I'm not making this up. King Charles's response to Thomas Blood stealing the crown jewels and then laughing with him was to give Thomas Blood a great big bag of money, land in Ireland worth £500 a year, and a pardon. He said, oh, well, you're just a japester. Be off with you. And by the way, have some land in Ireland, because, I'm not that interested in Ireland yet. And Now, this all happened in 1671. What about the space year 2024? Hundreds of years later, what can we learn from things like this? Similar heists, scams, and hacks are occurring daily. And they're using similar techniques. The people to worry about today aren't wearing false beards, although many of the people who are hacking your organizations are probably too young to actually grow facial hair. They might be kids. They might be organized cyber criminal gangs. Or they could be state-sponsored cyber criminals as well. And you might think your company isn't a target. Maybe you don't. And one thing to realize is you may not be the target, but it may be your customers who are the target. I'm reminded of the hack of Belgacom. Belgacom was Belgium's largest telecoms company, and they got hacked. Not because the hackers were interested in Belgacom. They were interested in one of Belgacom's customers. Because the hackers were not a cyber criminal gang, the hackers were GCHQ. And GCHQ is the intelligence gathering information, the communications gathering system up in Cheltenham in England. They are our equivalent to your NSA. And so they hacked a Belgian company, a company which, are friendly, in a friendly country. The British hacked a Belgian company because that Belgian company had customers in the Middle East who were of interest to GCHQ. These kind of things happen all the time. So you may think, oh, what have we got to worry about, really? Well, you may have customers, and you may be the soft underbelly through which the hackers get in order to access your customers. Something to really be aware of. So you may think you're not a target. It may be that the hackers feel differently. Or it may be your business partners who are of interest, if not your customers. And there's all kinds of methods. We're not going to talk in this presentation today about them because I think you guys know all about them. Things like ransomware, the huge way in which the cybercrime scene has changed by the monetization of cybercrime in a very, very effective way. Business email compromise, the fake invoices which are being sent out today by groups. And they then will be selling your exfiltrated data across the dark web as well. So we've come a long way from the Tower of London to Wall Street. The criminals will go wherever the money is. And the deviousness which they will show in these attacks is enormous. I was reading a report just the other day about a British chap. I'm sorry about that. Sometimes the British are actually villains. Actually, they're usually the villains in your movies, aren't we? It's very kind of you to give us work like that. It's very good. But yeah, I was reading about this guy who had hacked into organizations, broken into their email, and he had written rules in Outlook so that when particular employees received emails which appeared to be about mergers and acquisitions in publicly traded companies who were perhaps planning to do something, or maybe going to be making an announcement which would have an impact on their share price, it would be forwarded to them. And so this guy was basically doing insider trading. He knew what was going to be announced in public before it was made public. And so he was able to make hundreds of millions of dollars as a consequence. Very, very devious, some of these things. So there are clearly lessons to learn. Lessons that all of us should be learning about this from these kinds. So reduce your attack surface. Reduce the opportunities for the hackers to break in to steal your crown jewels. Maybe it's not such a good idea to allow anyone to come in to see the crown jewels and just have them in a cupboard. Maybe that's not so good. And if you are going to do that, maybe it's not such a good idea to have a 77-year-old man be the defense at that point. Maybe you need something a little bit more competent standing guard outside You want to harden your defenses. In the case of the crown jewels, they were protected just by a wooden gate. Following the theft of the crown jewels, they upgraded it to a metal gate. Well, that is an improvement. They've hardened their defenses. Well done to them, and they haven't been stolen again since. But you're likely to need a layered defense rather than rely upon just one thing. Thomas Blood was able to get in wearing a fake beard. He didn't have to prove his identity in any way. There was no kind of authentication. But authentication in some form, whether it be multi-factor authentication, whether it be biometrics, can potentially help. Is this someone who's supposed to have access to this particular area? Are people who they claim to be? Or are they something else? And educate your staff about common methods of attack. Things like business email compromise. Things about, like, if someone sends you an email containing an attachment which claims to be a video of Jennifer Lopez naked, I've just aged myself enormously, haven't I? I don't know who I just remember the days when it was Jennifer Lopez naked or Britney Spears. Nowadays, it's probably someone I've never heard of from a reality TV program. But, there is that thing where people think, you get that twitchy finger, don't you? You get that, I mustn't click, oh yeah, but it might actually be a video of Jennifer Lopez naked. Yes, Graham, it might be, but there's a very, very large shot. Yes, but what if it is Jennifer Lopez naked? And so you have to stop, have to stop yourself. So you need to educate yourself to prevent that from happening. Have to educate your staff about the threat of things like business email compromise. Have to educate them about and have policies and structures in place to prevent those kind of attacks from working inside your organization and causing problems. You have to have a culture within your organization where it's okay to say no to the CEO. So when the CEO says, I need this thing done right now, no one is going to be in trouble if they say, I'm sorry, boss, but we've got a procedure for that. And I have to check with so-and-so and so-and-so first before I do this, or you have to jump through this particular hoop. And a good CEO will respond to that and say, thank you, because you actually are saving my bacon. You've maybe just saved me $100 million. Now, we all know CEOs are psychopaths, so they're never going to respond like that, but wouldn't it be great if they did? So social engineering, people need to learn about social engineering. So if someone starts sending you lovely white gloves through the mail to befriend you, be a little bit suspicious. It's a shame, really. Wouldn't it be lovely if we lived in more innocent times where we felt it was all right just to be friendly to each other, to hold doors open? Oh, you're carrying lots of boxes. Yes, come through. No. Oh, you've forgotten your pass. Well, you've got a nice face. Come in. It'd be lovely if we lived in that world. We don't live in that world any longer. And that's an enormous shame. But our cynicism and our skepticism sometimes can be the thing which saves us. So educate people, and obviously don't fall for romance scams. Hack yourself before someone else hacks you. Find those vulnerabilities. Dress up in a beard if you like. Try and stick an orb down your trousers. See if you can get past the security guards. See if they're actually watching out for things. Because it could be one of your employees, remember, people who you've actually given permission to come into the organization, people who you've given passwords to access this data. They have a legitimate requirement for it. Maybe they do need access to it sometimes. So you have to be on your guard against that. I think the insider threat, that's a whole different presentation. The insider threat is a thing which is often really highly overlooked by the cybersecurity companies. I think because it's more difficult to deal with. So they love to talk about external hackers getting into your organization. What about the bad guys you've employed? What about the IT people? Oh, we all now have everyone working remotely. Oh, there's this guy who's really good at coding. He's coming. Oh, we checked his IP address. It's in Florida. So that's all right. And it turns out he's actually coming through a proxy because he's based in North Korea. Those kind of things are happening right now. So hack yourself before someone hacks you. Consider the insider threat as well. And test your defenses before someone else does. Now, I'm not saying fill your building with lions. But I'm also not saying fill it with loads of gold and guns and prisoners as well. What were they thinking? And recognise what your actual crown jewels are. That's got to be the first thing to do. What can we not afford to lose? And what measures are we going to put in place to prevent ourselves losing control of them and then falling into a hacker's hands and causing us problems going forward? You've been a lovely audience. Thank you very much for listening. We do have some time for questions, but I'll also say if you enjoyed today's talk, as Richard said earlier, I do appear on a couple of podcasts each week, Smashing Security, and there's also one all about the totally sane world of artificial intelligence and how nothing crazy ape bonkers is happening with that at all. All right, maybe that's not quite what it's like, but you'll be able to find out. But thank you very much. Are there any questions at all? Anyone who wants to test my historical knowledge? Anyone who wants just a bit of gossip from the cybersecurity industry, from the old world of Oh, yeah, he can put his hand up there. Chap in the red here.
Easy question. Of the various melange of stuff that was in the Tower of London in 1671, what remains?
Oh, so the question was, for people who couldn't hear, of the interesting melange, by the way, bonus points for using the word melange, I was very impressed with that, of items which were in the Tower of London in 1671, what actually remains? Interesting question, because there is a conspiracy theory. I believe I'm in the land of conspiracy theories. There is a conspiracy theory that the crown jewels that you Americans pay to go and see in the Tower of London aren't actually the crown jewels at all. There is an argument that actually it's all made out of wallpaper paste and bits like that. Because, of course, why would they put these priceless things on display in front of colonials? It just why would we denigrate them? Why would we why would we soil them in that fashion with you looking at them? I mean, they're for us, not for you chaps. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, there aren't any criminals still incarcerated at the Tower of London. Prince Andrew, for instance, he's got a place in Surrey, so he hasn't been put there. Oh, is he? Oh, he hasn't been arrested yet. Oh, he will be soon. So yeah, I don't think they have any lions there. And the money's no longer minted there. So any of you who have taken careful notes during my presentation about how to hack the Tower of London, I'm afraid it is now devoid. It won't work for you at all. You probably want to go for another mint instead, like, what's that one in Goldfinger? What's it called, the one in America? Fort Knox, yes, go for Fort Knox instead. Do that. All right. Any other questions? Yes, Richard?
I think they still have attack ravens.
Yes, very good point, yes. Yes, we have attack ravens at the Tower of London. So we actually, they're sort of like the predecessor to the drone, and they don't have machine guns attached. They're heat-seeking raven poop instead, which is at the Tower of London. Any other questions? Doesn't have to be Tower of London related. I'll answer anything, quite frankly. Oh yes, sir.
The question I had was, I know 1671 is when he actually perpetrated this, right?
Yeah.
Was it 1667? Was it like 4 years he thought about doing it and then
Yep.
executed?
So let me summarize that for people who, because you don't have a microphone, people who didn't hear. He basically said he's been to the Tower of London and seen the crown jewels, load of old rubbish. Yeah, is what he said. Don't waste the money. Now, our economy is in crisis, so I'd like to disassociate myself from that comment for the benefit of the UK Tourist Board. It's absolute nonsense. Please fly over and spend your dollars. We really do need them. The other question you had, the question which you asked was, my story began in 1669. You're absolutely right. That is when tours of the crown jewels began. The actual heist happened in 1671. As far as I know, it didn't take 2 years to plan. I think he was just gallivanting, causing other mischief in the years between. So it wasn't that this was... Obviously, there are incredible hacks which are happening in this modern day where the hackers can actually come into your organization, break into your network, and may lie dormant for months, if not years, gathering information. I remember hearing about a Canadian company, if you care at all about Canada. I won't bother telling you the story. Okay, I heard about a Canadian company, a law company, which was helping people move from the Middle East to the Americas, helping them with their legal paperwork and so forth. And what it turned out was a group of hackers hacked that law company, and rather than doing the traditional kind of, let's do a ransomware kind of thing on them, what they did was they just sat there, exfiltrating information. And they made it available on the dark web on a subscription basis. And so every month you could get an update on the latest information which they had acquired from that particular company, which obviously was of interest to some intelligence agencies around the world. I'm not saying that they were the people who were purchasing it, but they were a likely possible candidate as a customer for it. So sometimes the hackers do get in. I seem to remember that happened as well with was it the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, where Chinese hackers got in and just sat there for ages, and also potentially were finding information about the sources of information, which obviously could have been extremely dangerous for Chinese dissidents and people who were part of the democracy movement over there. So yeah. Any other questions at all? In which case, I don't see any hands going up or anything. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, everyone, making me feel so comfortable here at the Rochester Security Summit.